From prejudice to the sky. World War II was tearing the world apart, and in America the skies were ruled by one truth. Combat aviation was the pride of the military, reserved only for the best. And yet, in the 1940s, one thing was considered unthinkable: that African American pilots could ever fly into battle. Military leaders dismissed the very idea, claiming that black men lacked the courage, intelligence, and discipline to master the art of air combat. The official reports said it plainly: they would fail. But in Alabama, far from the battlefields of Europe, a revolution was being born. The U.S. War Department, under pressure from civil rights groups and lawsuits from young black applicants determined to serve, created a segregated experiment, an all-black flying squadron. They called it the 99th Pursuit Squadron. To many, it was a setup for failure. To the men who joined, it was a chance to make history. Tuskegee, Alabama, became the center of this audacious plan. Fields were cleared, runways built, and hangars filled with trainers. Here, under the relentless southern sun, the first cadets arrived in 1941. They were carefully selected, most of them college-educated, many with experience in civilian flying programs. They knew the weight they carried. Every maneuver, every exam, every flight was not just about their own survival. It was about proving an entire nation wrong. The training was merciless. Navigation, gunnery, aerobatics, formation flying. Every mistake could be fatal. Out of the first class of 13, only 5 made it to graduation. The others washed out, a brutal reminder of how high the standards were. But those 5 stood proudly in March 1942, earning their silver wings as the first African-American military pilots in U.S. history. At the center of it all was Benjamin O. Davis, Jr., a man whose life had been built on defying barriers. A West Point graduate who had endured years of silence and isolation from his white classmates, Davis carried that same iron discipline into Tuskegee. He knew that one slip, one failure, would be used as proof that the experiment should be shut down. His leadership and uncompromising standards forged the spirit of the squadron. Outside the gates, the world was still segregated. The cadets were denied entry to restaurants, forced into separate facilities, and told in no uncertain terms that the Army had little faith in them. Yet inside Tuskegee, something else was happening. They were learning, they were flying, and they were becoming a brotherhood bound not just by uniform but by a mission larger than themselves. By the summer of 1942, the 99th Squadron was no longer just an idea. It was a fighting force in training, preparing to join the war in North Africa. The mockery of commanders and the laughter of German propaganda would soon meet hard reality. Because these young men, once doubted, would carry into battle something far more powerful than prejudice: skill, discipline, and the burning need to prove that the sky itself made no distinction of color. The Tuskegee Airmen had earned their wings. Now, they were ready to earn their place in history. Baptism of fire. In 1943, the experiment left the classroom and entered the war. The men of the 99th Fighter Squadron boarded ships, crossed the Atlantic, and stepped onto the sun-scorched airfields of North Africa. For the first time in U.S. history, African-American fighter pilots were in combat. The orders were clear: prove yourselves in the skies, or vanish into the footnotes of history. Their first mission came on June 2, 1943, over the fortified island of Pantelleria. Flying Curtiss P-40 Warhawks, the Tuskegee pilots escorted Allied bombers and strafed enemy defenses. Flak burst in the air, German fighters circled overhead, and commanders back home waited for them to fail. But when the mission ended, the bombers were safe, the targets were hit, and the red tails, though not yet painted red, had drawn first blood. The so-called experiment had survived its baptism of fire. The 99th soon moved into Italy, joining the brutal campaign that would grind its way up the peninsula. Here, the air war was relentless. Luftwaffe fighters swept down from the Alps, striking bomber formations with ruthless precision. Every mission was a gamble. Still, the Tuskegee pilots held their ground. They flew patrols, escorted bombers, and tangled with seasoned German veterans. Losses came, but so did victories. On February 7, 1944, Tuskegee pilots shot down 3 Focke-Wulf 190s in a single day, stunning those who had doubted them. As the war intensified, the squadrons were reorganized into the 332nd Fighter Group. with new bases in central Italy and new aircraft at their command. The P-47 Thunderbolt and eventually the legendary P-51 Mustang, the transformation was complete. Their planes bore a mark of pride, bright red tails that stood out against the blue European sky. The enemy would know who they were, and so would every bomber crew they protected. The Germans laughed at first. Rumors spread that the red tails were poorly trained, easy kills. Luftwaffe aces bragged they would tear them apart. But when the dogfights came, the laughter ended quickly. The Tuskegee pilots fought with discipline, refusing to abandon their escort duties. While other groups sometimes chased glory, leaving bombers exposed, the red tails stayed tight, forcing German fighters into deadly crossfire. Bomber crews began to notice. Whispered at first, then demanded outright, "Give us the red tails. They bring us home." Victories piled up. In July 1944, Joseph Ellsbury destroyed 3 enemy fighters in a single mission, a feat that cemented the squadron's reputation. Others followed, and soon the red tails were feared and respected across the skies. By the end of 1944, the balance had shifted. What had begun as a ridiculed experiment was now a weapon that Allied commanders relied on. The Tuskegee Airmen had not only proven they could fight, they had shown they could excel against the very best Germany had to offer. And as their reputation spread, one truth became undeniable. The red tails had earned their place among the elite. Triumph in the skies. By 1945, the red tails were no longer a question mark. They were the answer. The war was reaching its climax, and the skies over Europe had become the deadliest arena of all. The Luftwaffe threw everything it had left, battle-hardened veterans, swarms of Messerschmitts and Focke-Wulfs, even the revolutionary Me-262 jet fighters. Against them, the Tuskegee Airmen rose higher than ever before. The mission that sealed their legend came on March 24, 1945. Bomber fleets lifted off from Italy, their target. Berlin itself, the heart of Hitler's crumbling empire. Escorting them all the way into the Reich was the 332nd Fighter Group, flying their P-51 Mustangs with bright red tails blazing in the sun. For hours they flew into the teeth of German defenses. Over the capital of the Third Reich, jet fighters screamed into the formations. In the chaos of flak and fire, the red tails struck back. That day, they shot down 3 Me-262s, the jets that the Nazis believed would turn the tide of the air war. Instead, they fell to the very men the Germans had once mocked. By the end of the war, the record spoke for itself. More than 15,000 sorties flown, over 200 bomber escort missions, 112 enemy aircraft destroyed in aerial combat, hundreds more trains, trucks, and airfields obliterated, 150 distinguished flying crosses earned. And perhaps most important of all, the bomber crews under their protection suffered far fewer losses when escorted by the red tails than with almost any other group. The price was high. 66 Tuskegee pilots never came home. 27 were captured and endured the brutality of German prison camps. Every mission carried sacrifice. But every mission also carried proof. Proof that courage, discipline, and skill had nothing to do with the color of a man's skin. When the guns finally fell silent, the Tuskegee Airmen returned to a country still divided, still marked by segregation. They were decorated heroes abroad, but second-class citizens at home. And yet their example could not be buried. In 1948, President Truman issued Executive Order 9981, desegregating the U.S. Armed Forces. That decision owed much to the men who had fought under red tails, proving beyond doubt that equality was not a theory but a fact written in blood and sacrifice. Decades later, the Tuskegee Airmen would be honored with the Congressional Gold Medal. Pilots like Benjamin O. Davis Jr., Lee Archer, and Charles McGee became symbols of not just wartime heroism, but of a breaking dawn in American history. They had shattered barriers in the skies of Europe, and in doing so, they cracked the walls of prejudice back home. From laughter and scorn to fear and respect to immortality, the journey of the Red Tails remains one of the most powerful stories of World War II. They were America's first black fighter pilots. They were guardians of the bombers. They were warriors of the sky, and they left behind a legacy not of color, but of courage.